Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show helping men to open up about manhood. My name is Simon Rennie and my aim is to get men talking. From mental health to fatherhood and everything in between, Mindful Men creates a safe space for conversation. Now, before we get into this episode, I want to say a huge thank you for joining me. It means a world for you to join me and talk about men's issues. And if you love what you hear, please subscribe and share the episode with your mates. You can also join the conversation on Instagram and YouTube, and I'd love to connect with you there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, welcome to the Mindful Men podcast. My name is Simon Rennie, and I'm the man behind Mindful Men. Today, I've got a very special guest, the very first guest that I've ever had on the Mindful Men podcast, David Day. How are you, mate?
Good, thanks, Rennie. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, buddy. And for the listeners out there, I just think it's probably a courtesy to let them know that we've known each other for almost 15 years now, I think it is. And, you know, we met in Canberra as young graduates in the government. It's good to see you, probably too long between drinks. But yeah, so welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good to catch up and good to be joining you.
I'd like to start off by letting my guests tell a bit about themselves. So in a few words, can you let us know what makes you David Day?
Well, I'm probably a largely uninteresting character, but yeah, boy from the bush out in central New South Wales. I grew up in a small town out near a little way from Dubbo in the middle of nowhere. Grew up on a farm, started out after leaving school doing a bit of shearing and whatnot. Realised that my back wasn't going to be up to a life full of shearing, so went away to uni and did something very different along the lines of English literature and that sort of field, which somehow led me to starting work in a government department in Canberra, which is where I met you, obviously. And yeah, I've been in the public service ever since, which I sort of have a love-hate relationship with. There's plenty to not like about it, but plenty to like about it as well. And I think the work does sort of do some good for Australians at large. So I do like it. But yeah, that's where I work these days. And I have a lovely wife and two young kids. A 4-month-old and a 3.5-year-old, who are both the light of my life, despite the toddler being very much a challenge at times. But yeah, love being a dad to those two, and I love a bit of sport, both participating, although not so much these days, but here and there, and also watching. And that's about me, really.
Yeah, I want to take it back a bit. So from shearing to English lit at uni. How did that come about?
Who knows? I think part of it was at high school. I did sort of like English type subjects and the sort of study of language and fiction and how it all illuminates what's going on in people's heads and society and whatnot. Always interested me, even at school. And then, yeah, as I say, actually getting out and spending days on end in the sheds is quite tough physically, and I genuinely had some back issues very early on, and thought there's got to be a way I can sort of do something more with the mind than the body, because the mind probably works a bit better than the body, although neither of them work that well. But yeah, I think it's something around that. Was keen to do something that involved solving problems with your head rather than getting the body out there and not being able to walk in the morning every day.
Yeah. And where did you go to uni again?
So La Trobe University, which is based in Victoria. I did first few years at Albury-Wodonga, right on the border, and then did honours, etc., in Melbourne itself.
Yeah. So what was it like going from a boy from the bush into inner city Melbourne?
Difficult, actually. I was like a loaded weapon type comedian character at some point. You wouldn't believe how naive and things. I was scared to catch trains at one point because I didn't sort of know how the ticketing system worked, and I'd get all confused and didn't know where I'd end up and all this sort of thing. And I thought I could walk everywhere. I tried the day I got to Melbourne. I thought I'll see how far I am from the city, and I'll walk it in. And if anyone knows, any of your listeners know Melbourne at all, but the campus is out in Bundoora, which is right towards the edge of Melbourne. So 6 or 7 hours later, I arrived in the city and knew I was going to have to overcome my fear of trains to get back, because I wasn't doing another 6 or 7 hour walk to get back. So it was, the big smoke was like, I was genuinely like some sort of cartoon character or something. I had no idea what I was doing and whatnot, but learned the ropes eventually, and ended up being your typical latte sipping, sushi eating city dweller by the end of it all.
Nice. I can see you doing that in our grad year. And I noticed you've got your Tigers top on, and you said you're a man of sport. So tell us a bit about your passion for footy. Yeah,
I've always followed the Tigers and in the rugby league, based on my dad took me to watch a trial game that they took out to the bush one year, and it was the Tigers were playing Dragons, I think it was, and I liked the orange in their jersey, and that attracted me to them for that reason, which I'm not sure orange is everyone's colour, but something struck me about it, and I followed them ever since. And then they merged with the team who my dad followed, so it was good to sort of share in both going for the one footy team. But footy and tennis have probably been the main sports. So followed the Tigers, but also played a bit of footy myself. Never very well. I was hopeless. I don't, if any of your listeners know league much, I was the sort of player where they put me out on the wing, but not because I was fast. It was because it's the ball rarely goes out that far. So they kept me out of trouble by keeping me way out there. And a few times I did get the ball, I'd embarrass the rest of the team by very slowly waddling down the wing, not able to outrun anyone. But I love playing that, and I love playing tennis as well. So
are you still playing any footy or tennis, or?
No, we're going to get back into social tennis this year as a way of introducing our young toddler to the sport, because we think we'll try and get her involved in learning the game. So do plan to pick that up. But no, these days it's a bit of social tennis here and there. Still do a bit of running, although less than I used to, and still go to the gym. I've got a mate here who's also likes to do a bit of boxing training sort of thing, and we're both much older than anyone else who does the boxing here. So we sort of go along when the other one does and box along together without all the young fellas trying to take our heads off. So, but that's about it. Yeah, not much competitive sport these days, I must admit.
That's good. All right. So this is the Mindful Men podcast. Thinking back to the last week, what's been on your mind and what's been taking up space inside your head?
Well, as you may know, well, as you would know, with having similar aged kids, it's often hard to sit back and reflect in busy day-to-day lives. You sort of get up and you're straight away assaulted by youngsters trying to get them into clothes and breakfast and ready for school and whatnot. So just looking after kids takes up a lot of thought and focus all the time. But I suppose other than that, we're still where I am, working from home, and but we're slowly transitioning back to working from the office. So on my mind this week is achieving that balance of working from home while looking after kids who are often at home, and keeping things moving along at work, which is very unexciting, I know, but you sort of get lost in the chaos of trying to do that, I must admit, rather than reflecting on much else.
It was actually a good response that you've got there, because it leads straight into the next questions and the theme for today. So what I wanted to talk to you about today was COVID and parenting through COVID, and how that's impacted you over, say, year 1 and 2. And I think we're in year 3 now, maybe. and coming out the other end as well. So thinking back to when COVID started, so what, the end of 2019, start of 2020, what was your first thoughts that, of COVID, and did you pay much attention to the news, or were you keeping an eye on it, or just disregarding it? What do you remember from back then?
Yeah, good question. It's a big question that's central to all our lives at the moment. But I've always been a news fiend. I'm always checking what's happening on my phone, and I'm one of those people who might be like your grandparents or something. I like to sit down at 6 o'clock and watch the news, and while everyone else wants to watch something more interesting like cartoons or something, I'm saying, no, it's time for the news. So yeah, definitely paying attention to the news when it all kicked off, and was following it. And yeah, it was a crazy time when it all kicked off. I had a lot of leave booked in at work. I was going to go out and spend some time on my parents' farm because my dad was aging a bit at the time, and I wanted to spend some time with him and that sort of thing. And it coincided with right when everyone from our work was told to go home and work from home. And so then our daycare said no, people had to take their kids out or these sorts of things. So we took our toddler out of daycare and had her at home. And so I couldn't go out to take the leave period that I wanted. And we had our toddler at home. So I had about 2 months I was taking off. Spent the first part of that at home here in Canberra, looking after our toddler day in, day out, which was both challenging, like very hard to keep them entertained. And when we couldn't go anywhere, I spent all the time inside the house or inside our yard. And but also rewarding in getting the time to spend with them. In the end, I cut my leave a bit short and went back to work because there wasn't much sense in doing anything different because I couldn't go anywhere or do anything. So I may as well have been logging on and doing that. But essentially, yeah, did follow what was going on, did affect me, and did have that consequence of spending all my time with our toddler, which was hard but good too.
Yeah. And what's some of the things that you would use or do to pass the day, like, and entertain the toddler?
Yeah, well, that was the number one challenge, I think, was when you couldn't go down to your local park, when you couldn't go to the pool, when you couldn't do all sorts of things that you might normally do, and had to stay at home, finding something to keep Lily organised or occupied, and happy was very challenging. And to do it day in, day out, keep it different was hard to do. But it was good in that it helped me learn new skills, like we build a little cottage with a slide sort of thing for out in the backyard that's gonna whereas I can't assemble things or build things to save my life, but I was forced to by the situation, and it was sort of it was good, and it was something to share with Lily to do that. And yeah, there's a few little things like that where we'd look online for something that Lily might like to get her outside and not have her in front of the TV all the time. And so, yeah, we've got a few different little things assembled in the backyard, and had to spend a lot of time in the backyard playing outdoors things and exploring and learning to garden. I'd never done any gardening much before, although I do recall you and I and another housemate at one point trying to grow carrots in a share house, but that did surprisingly well for the amount of attention they were given. But other than that, not a gardener, so it was good to sort of do those sorts of things and share them with Lily, and learn a few things myself, to be honest. But yeah, in a nutshell, capture it all. I think trying to stay away from the TV and do some things together as much as possible. But the TV was also useful at times.
Yeah. How did you find, like, the COVID news cycle was pretty, in our household, we got to a point where we almost had to turn off the news. We were doing the daily updates and listening to that, but then it just all became too much. So did you have the similar experience in your house, or you just kept going through it and listening to all the updates?
I did have a similar experience, probably that experience on steroids, if you like, in that, as I said earlier, I'm a bit of a news fiend and always love keeping up to date with things, but I've actually the same, where over time I've sort of looked at the news less and less, because it's often not good. And actually, not long after the whole COVID thing kicked off, I was sort of getting a few pangs and things in my chest. I got a bit worried at one point. Like everyone else, I put on the COVID kilos, and a lot of them. And at one point, I was sort of concerned I might have heart issues or something. So I went off to see my GP, and turns out I had. They told me I probably got generalized anxiety, and so I had a bit of a battle through the 12 months, 2 years, 2.5 years now of COVID with anxiety. So that also contributed to me not wanting to be bombarded with bad news all the time, day in, day out, because I don't think it would help get through or deal with anxiety. So yeah, a bit the same as you. I probably reduced my news consumption in recent times, but yeah, I still do follow the headlines here and there, but yeah, the news can sometimes, when it's constantly not good, be something you want to dip out of and look at something positive and whatnot at times, particularly when you've got young kids around and you want to have a sort of a positive mood in your household, if you like. I think not always having the news on can be a good thing.
Yeah, and you said that you got diagnosed with generalized anxiety. What's some of the things that you did to kind of manage that throughout the last couple of years?
Well, it's been very hard to manage, to be honest. It got quite significant. Snowballed into a bit of depression at one point. I found it quite difficult to even get out of bed at some points. It was, it's very, very down with things. But I think having kids and wanting to keep on going for them and not have them affected by me feeling bad was one thing that sort of helped. Listening to my doctor and what they suggested and whatnot was also worth doing. I think in the past I'm someone who sort of wouldn't even go and see a doctor as a rule. At one point, it would have been years before I'd even seen a doctor at one point. But I see the value in listening to them and what they say now. And then also they put me on a mental health plan to see a psychologist. So I did that, and that's something else where normally I'd have no sort of time for that sort of thing. I sort of wouldn't necessarily have believed you just get over it yourself. You pull your socks up and just get on with it. But then I thought I'll listen to it and see it through, and I did that, and didn't agree with the psychologist on a lot of things and whatnot, but they were quite helpful. And some of the things they told me to do and think about to sort of stay positive and calm down at times and this sort of thing have been really helpful. And I'm glad that I didn't dismiss it and listened and went along. So yeah, kids, doctor, psychologist have all been key coping mechanisms, if you like, that have helped me sort of get through. And I'm a lot better at the moment. As you may know, they're sort of, well, as you would know, being involved in the sort of mental health sort of field yourself, these things are long term, so they don't just solve overnight. But I'm certainly in a lot better place today than I was 12 months ago, I think.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And thinking back to that time when you first went and saw the doctor, like, did you feel any fear about talking about what was happening inside your head, or it just came out easily for you? What was that experience like? Because I know a lot of guys struggle with this.
Absolutely. So I think to start with, I didn't necessarily know really that I had a big mental thing. As I say, when I first went to the doctor, a sort of physical stuff happening where I thought, am I having a heart attack or something here? And it was sort of over time, and after getting diagnosed with anxiety, that I thought, there is a bit going on in the head, where I I think actually my wife is probably the best person to I found to talk to. She's had to deal with me raving on with a lot of um, crazy and nervous sort of things at times. So to explain, a sort of health anxiety was a big symptom of mine, where I'd get
Yeah.
worried every 5 minutes. If I had a little pain somewhere, I thought, oh, I must have this horrible disease that I'm about to die from, sort of thing. And you look back and think it was all a bit crazy and whatnot. You don't sort of realize at the time. But so my wife would have had a rolled her eyes a few times, and me coming at her with the next thing I was worried about, and then the next thing and the next thing. But yeah, in her being patient and
Yeah.
sort of getting me to talk about things, I think I did, yeah, talk about things to her at the very least, and that was helpful. More generally, yeah, I'm probably not the sort of person who would open up to many people around me, but yeah, probably have one or two close friends where I sort of say a few things to, and that did help. But yeah, I am, like you say, one of those who can be hard for me to sort of talk about things in great depth, and feels a bit, I don't know, non-manly to sort of go into what you're feeling inside your head and feel like you're being a bit of a drama queen or something.
Yeah.
But when you do, I hope you do find it helpful, I think. Well,
Yeah.
I have found it helpful.
And have you found that the more you talk about it with different people, the easier it gets? Or do you still find it hard to talk about?
You'll find it hard with some people, I would say. I think sometimes it does depend. Well, mostly it depends on me.
Yeah.
But sometimes it depends on the other person too. Like, there'd still be close friends I have that I still wouldn't broach any sort of topic of anxiety or and me having it or anything, at least not in a serious way. Whereas though there are other people that I do find it easier to talk to, and I do talk to them, and yeah, over time,
Yeah.
um, it does become easier to tell more about what you're feeling and why, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I think the more you do that, the better it is. Partly for getting it off your chest, partly because it's sort of um, when people can have good ideas to put back at you, that yeah, well, have you thought about this in relation to your situation? And when they say that, it sort of gives you a bit of perspective you might not have had, that can often be helpful.
Yeah. And I think you touched on a really good point before around how it might not be very manly to open up about some of these things. And, we grew up in a generation where where people didn't talk about this type of stuff. It was more suck it up, you're a bloke, you can't cry, you can't feel these things. So I think the fact that you've both struggling with that, and that might have held you back, and then also committed to the cause and getting better for your kids and your family and yourself, I think, hats off to you, because it is a very hard thing for guys to do. So I'm glad that you've done it, and that you keep doing it as well.
Absolutely. But yeah, highly encourage people to talk when you think things are going on in your head, because very rarely do people around you think that you are being a drama queen or whatever. And you'll find that, well, at least I've found that, as I say, other people can give you new things to think about, and just saying it to them, just saying what you're feeling to people itself feels unburdening and helpful. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing where you can do it. But
Yeah.
I do acknowledge that it's harder for different people at times, and it can take some work to do it in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. Now, thinking about the last, say, 12 months, you've been going through that the internal struggle as well. Australia's been border lockdowns all over the place from state lines, and you live in a little pocket of the ACT, and then just over the border is New South Wales, which is where home is for you. How long did it take to get back to the farm, or did your extended family and friends? What was those kind of impacts like for you?
Yeah, so we were impacted, definitely. I think it probably had something to do with my anxiety. I think there are a few things that together sort of kicked off my anxiety in the first place, but I think the border closures and whatnot was one of them. So we had my dad, I mentioned, was not in great health back when it all kicked off, and he was moved into hospital full time around the time of when the lockdowns and whatnot started happening in March 2020. And so it affected me greatly in that firstly, it was hard to um, go and see him, aside from the border, being in a hospital. While the rules and things constantly changed, often the case was that I couldn't go at all, or I couldn't go for very long if I did. And so dementia was one of the things that, the main thing that he was suffering from. And at one point, even my mother wasn't allowed to go and see him. He always hated hospital, and the idea of him living in one without anyone able to go and see him, including me, was very difficult. And then there was the fact of COVID too, that we sort of had to think, if by some chance I do have it and I go out there and give it to him, it's like, then that's not good. So it was sort of so hard to weigh up that what's the right thing to do, and of the very little I can do in terms of being able to see him, how do I get to do it, and these sorts of things. So yeah, they played on my mind. And then we had a funeral on my wife's side of the family for a very close family member of hers, which completely came out of the blue. And like many others, we couldn't go to the funeral, and we were on the phone arguing and pleading and all sorts of things with Queensland Health, trying to get some sort of exemption, and being denied that without really being listened to, we felt. So we didn't get there in the end. And so yeah, we went through a few things like many people did. And yes, it certainly did affect us like it did many people.
Yeah. And you've found, since the borders have been opening up now, we've got the vaccination rates up now, and the opening borders, and even they're starting to open international borders, that you've been able to get back home, or are you still, some people are actually getting more anxious about going back out and staying home, preferring to stay home and so forth. So how has opening up affected you and the family?
Really hasn't affected us that much, to be honest, in that we are one of those that you mentioned. We sort of probably don't go out as much. More so my wife, who's very unwilling to get COVID, although we'll probably all get it in the end, and she knows that as well as anyone. But yeah, she'd prefer to be home unless she has to be. And the fact that we've got a 4-month-old, and we prefer to obviously not have him get sick if it's at all possible. So those things mean that we are sort of one of those households where we do tend to stay home a bit, and we haven't travelled much, even to New South Wales. But we have travelled here and there, including to Queensland once, up to Brisbane. So yeah, it's been good that we have finally been able to see people. But yeah, we're sort of still do stick around at home quite a bit. But as I say, that's partly to do with having a 4-month-old and the difficulties in moving them around much. I think as they get a few months more behind their belt, we will start travelling a little bit more, but possibly not as much as we would have 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, and I think having young children is particularly difficult because, we're seeing, 5-year-olds can now get the vaccination. But for the under 5s, I've got one now who's just turned 5 and one who's 2. I'm constantly thinking, do we get them vaccinated, or when's their turn to get vaccinated? What happens if we inadvertently bring it home and then they're not vaccinated? And, particularly our youngest one, she's got a lot of respiratory issues. Do we end up spending time in hospital and so forth? It's a bit scary for us. And, opening up again and we've, going back to work, maybe back to the office. What's those kinds of things feeling for you and trying to protect your family?
Oh, you're 100% right. I think young kids, particularly as you say with your younger girl, where they're not sort of vaccinating that age group yet or anything, it's hard to know what to do or what not to do. So we sort of comfort ourselves with the knowledge, if you like, that generally young kids have been pretty good in not getting really sick, as I understand it, for the most part with COVID. So just having some confidence that kids are resilient little things, and if worst comes to worst and they did get sick, hopefully they'd be more okay than me or you in getting over it potentially, while also balancing that with being cautious and not going to Woolies at the busiest time of the day if we can help it, sort of thing, and wearing our masks where we're told to. And I know that's a contentious thing, but we're sort of happy for people to do whatever they think is right. But we tend to, if we're told to wear a mask, we'll wear it. If we're told to stand away from someone, we'll do it, just to sort of do the best we can to keep our young kids, more so than ourselves, I think, safe and healthy. But yeah, more generally, I think I'm not quite so worried about opening up. I'm going to have to go back into the office from March, and probably going to have to wear a mask inside. And although I say, we sort of listen to the health bodies and whatnot and do that when we're told, I really don't want to be spending all day, every day, wearing a mask. So I'm really hoping the restrictions are eased on that and we don't have to do it, to be honest, because I'm not sure how I'm going to get with that. But beyond that, I think we're relatively comfortable and at ease with things opening back up. But being cautious and not being silly or getting right back into doing things that we once would have straight away, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Given opening up and trying to get to a new normal, or whatever the new normal is these days, like, has there been anything from COVID that you've taken away for you yourself as a bloke or as a family man, as a positive thing that you're going to keep doing moving forward? Or has COVID changed you in any way that you think?
It gave me the anxiety, and that definitely changed me and some things to think about. But beyond that, maybe not directly what you're asking about, but I think it has changed. Well, you're always going to value time with your young kids, obviously, above just about anything else in life. But I think spending more time at home with my kids, and with Lily in particular, who's been around throughout the COVID period, it's sort of really awoken me, if you like, to just how little time we have in a day. When you're racing them off to daycare or something like that, just how little time we have in a given day to spend with them. It's glimpses here and there when you first get up, and then when they get home, but then you're racing them off to bed when they get home. So the opportunity COVID's given to spend a bit more time has actually been a good thing. And I think it's sort of awoken me to, now that I've seen what a day looks like where I'm spending all of it with Lily versus what a day looks like when she's at daycare and I'm at work and we're doing after school activities or whatever's happening. It's given me a new appreciation for making use of every bit of time you have with your kids, I think, because I know it's an old cliche that you probably see plenty of Facebook memes and things about how little time you have with the kids before they grow old, but I think it is a true thing that you should stand back and reflect on from time to time and really cherish that time you do have and make the most of it. Don't just sit them in front of the TV and so you can go do something on the computer or something, but actually they love it when you sit down and look them in the eye and play with them and be silly and make building blocks that they can knock down and do that sort of stuff. Is if you really invest in it, make the most of it, it's a really good thing. And I think it's probably the COVID era has sort of awoken me to that, even if it's a pretty simple thing that everyone's probably aware of anyway, because everyone wants to spend time with their kids. But it really has made me aware of that even more so, I think.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really good point there, because like traditionally before COVID, traditionally mums would have a year off or 6 months off or 3 months off, whatever they could afford to do. And dads would have 2 weeks off, maybe 4 weeks if we're lucky, before we're back at work, and not really get to spend those quality daytime with them, with the kids and the wife. But I remember when COVID first hit for us and our family, we had just the December before, so when COVID was actually just starting, we had our little daughter, and my wife had all these grand plans of what she was going to do for the year, all these mummy-daughter dates and mums groups, and none of that happened. But what happened was I got to spend so much more time because, I was still working through COVID but working from home, but being able to just duck out of the office and have a good cuddle for a little while was just an amazing thing. And as you said, playing outside more and exploring our garden and doing things around the house was a unique time that we'll never get again, unless the next pandemic happens. But it's just, I think it's an amazing thing for dads, particularly to be able to share in that time. And even though my wife struggled through that, she got struggled mentally through the COVID lockdowns and that particularly that first year. She's now been able to start going out with the daughter and doing some of those mummy-daughter things now, as a 2-year-old as opposed to a brand new bub. So you really hit something there around dads being more available in that first year, and you're doing it right now again. In a slightly hybrid version of what we experienced a couple of years ago. So that sounds great.
Yeah. Also, sort of extending that point of yours about the dads having more exposure. I think potentially for us dads, certainly in my case at least, it does sort of really give you that appreciation for how hard mums work too, because without wanting to sound all cliched again or anything, but it is such hard work to be every second of the day and often of the night as well, keeping them entertained or occupied and away from harm and doing what needs to be done. It's like a 24/7 hard yakka that really, you do get that. If you didn't already have the appreciation for it, you do sort of really get it when you're exposed to it yourself.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And being home for that first year lockdown, definitely get to see that firsthand. We used to go to work and kind of forget about it for 8 hours a day and then come home and do our little shift. But seeing that firsthand, and you can probably hear mine going off right now in the next room if you can't. But yeah, seeing it firsthand, certainly a new appreciation for what mums do. Or, stay-at-home dads, as well. There are stay-at-home dads that do it as well. But stay-at-home parents, what they do is just amazing. So hats off to them.
And as harder work as you'll find, as I say, I've spent a bit of time in the shearing sheds and that. And people think they work hard out there, which they certainly do.
Yeah.
But if you've got an idea that staying at home parenting is something to be a lot easier, that's just as hard. I can tell you, having spent time in both environments.
Yeah. So thinking about the last couple of years and your mental health journey and your family and all those types of things that we've talked about, what's one thing that you take away or offer advice for the listeners out there to be mindful of moving in the next 12 months coming out of COVID? Is there something that you could recommend that they keep their minds on or do differently just from your own experience?
Possibly nothing groundbreaking or revolutionary or anything, but I think sort of reiterating a couple of things we've spoken about. I think your reference to the sort of news cycle is a good one about, I think, occasionally stepping back from all the bombardment of stuff you get from news can be a positive thing. And I'm not saying don't ever listen to the news or don't believe it or whatever. It's certainly not saying anything like that. Just take some time to step back and enjoy what's going on in your life that's good, whether it be your kids or if you don't have kids, whether it be whoever you live with or whether it be a sport you're involved in or a hobby you're involved in. Just take some time to do that or spend some time with whoever and really savor that and make use of it. And then if you want to step back into listening to the news later on that day, do so. And then, the only other thing would be, again, reiterating something we spoke about, sort of that talking to people where you don't have to go all Dawson's Creek with everyone around you and open up and say everything you feel to every person you come across. But if there's something on your mind, maybe give some thought to who's someone you'd be comfortable saying or talking to about that, whether it's about the whole thing or one part of it or something related to it or whatever. But just have a think, is there someone I'd be a bit comfortable to and to talk to about it, and give some thought to talking about it, because as cliched as it is and as simple as it is, talking really does help, and you'll both feel better and often learn things from other people, even if it's just you talk to some practical old aunt or something who says, "Oh, don't be so silly. Have you thought about this?" It can be what they're asking you to think about. Can be oh yeah, actually, that's a good way of looking at it. And now that you've said that, it can sort of really change the way you go about your day-to-day life for the better. So yeah, those two things: step back from all the bad news occasionally, and talk about it if you've got something on your mind, and you can pick someone out who you might be comfortable to talk to it about with.
Some great points there, mate. Thanks for sharing those. I completely agree. It's been really good to catch up again, mate. It's been way too long between drinks, but before I let you go, this is a point of the podcast where I let guests, plug whatever. So, whether or not you've got something that you're doing on social media, or you're running a business, or even if it's plugging something that you're watching on TV, or a good book that you're reading at the moment, or some good music, or a good podcast, for example. What's something that you can plug away so that the listeners can get some either insight into you or insight into what you're watching or listening to or reading?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. Don't worry, I'm not going to flog a soft drink or a chocolate bar or something. Certainly nothing like that, I suppose. I'm sure all your listeners are aware of Ozark because it's a great show on Netflix. But if you haven't seen that, check that out. I'm watching that, and that's got me hooked.
Yeah.
Otherwise, occasionally dabble in a bit of short story writing. I've got a story that was published in magazine Mindfood January edition. So, have a flick through that and check it out if you get the chance. But yeah, I'm not savvy enough businessman to have much to flog, to be honest. Watch some good Netflix is about all I've got.
That sounds good. I'm watching Ozark as well. It's a great show. So
it is.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for your time today, mate. It's been great catching up, and
thank you.
All the best with going back to work in the office. I think we're going back to work at the same time, and in about 5 minutes, I'm going to duck out because my 2-year-old is tearing down a wall right now. I can hear them screaming. But it's been wonderful to catch up, and thanks for your time today.
Not a worry, it really is. Thanks, Rennie.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.